So when does Obsidian University officially start? Like,
It officially starts June 12th. So that will be just a couple of days after this episode releases. But wanted to give one last call out if anyone wants to join. I am really excited about this one. Also very nervous. The imposter syndrome is kicking in hard.
lame. This
but
shouldn't be at this point.
Yeah, well, the life theme cohort has gone really, really well. You probably don't even know this because you weren't there for the last one, but we added a bonus session because everyone wanted to come back and share their life theme after they worked on it.
Okay.
So we added a sixth call to that one, and I'm starting to
So that's
do.
tomorrow.
Yep.
Okay. Good to know.
It is in circle, but I hadn't reminded you that we or I hadn't told you that we added that.
Yeah, because I'm where I'm at in that is because I'm almost caught up, but I got to share the core values and then the life theme itself. And this actually plays into a little bit of follow up. I'll get to this in a little bit, but like that's like all I'm catching up on that. So that's good to know. I will plan to be there and try to get caught up before then.
Cool. But yeah, having done 5, soon to be 6 weeks of that cohort, and just seeing or hearing the feedback, because I've started to do one-on-one calls with people, also just to ask like, what could be better, like how would you improve this for next time, sort of a thing. And the feedback has all been pretty positive. Obviously, there's some things that I can do a little bit better, and I have ideas for making it even better next go around, but that has given me the confidence to say that I can do a pretty mean cohort.
Good.
And so I am looking forward to doing that with Obsidian in the next couple of weeks. So yeah, it starts June 12th, goes for 4 weeks after that, and the cost is $247. The link will be in the show notes if anyone wants to join, but you can just go to obsidianuniversity.com, and that will get you access to not just the I guess there are going to be 12 different live calls. There'll be 8 different content sessions and 4 like open office sessions where we can just nerd out about stuff and answer questions and inspire each other about better ways to use Obsidian. But then all of that stuff will be recorded, and all that will exist inside of another Circle community. Just because Circle is the platform that I understand, and it's the easiest way to deliver all this stuff, in my opinion, in a private way. You know, people who pay can get access to it, and also gives me some flexibility for adding some more stuff to that Obsidian University campus, I'm calling it, in the future.
Nice. I'm super excited about this. You're going to knock it out of the park. I totally know you are. So
thank you.
just having been through the life theme cohort, if you run it in any form whatsoever close to that, it's going to be gold. So yeah, you'll be good.
Awesome. You gonna join
You have
us?
my support, 100%. I'm gonna try to.
Alrighty.
It's my goal. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to catch all of them because I know I've got some trips involved that are gonna conflict with that are already on the calendar. But my goal is to join it. Yeah, it'll be good.
Cool. You got to be there at least for the first one, so I can give you credit for convincing me to use Obsidian from Realm Research.
All right, good to know. I will be there to take the accolades gladly. Well, we better get into some of this other follow-up because there's a bunch of it here. I've got 2 of them I'm actually going to defer despite there being a long list of them. But it occurred to me, so the 2 that I'm referring to are come up with my own filtering questions. This is kind of like, how do you decide what it is that you're going to take on and not take on? And it occurred to me that this actually is and can be a direct overlap with your life theme cohort. And as I've been working on like the core values piece and trying to document my own core values, it occurred to me that it's pretty simple to take that concept and tweak it to question form. And that's what I've been like working through. And to kind of coincide with that, it also interacts with the first one on the list, which was list 10 things for I know I'm being successful when. So I have a list of about, I would say about 18 of these that I've been like whittling down, but those are all like intertwined with each other, I'm finding. Like trying to get those questions, the 10 things, and then the core values piece, I'm trying to get all of those condensed to where I'm happy with them. Like I'm super close on that, just not 100%. So I wrote them, I actually put them down in the action items thing for next time because I want to make sure that I get these 100% and can share those. next time because they're just not in shareable form right now. But I don't want them to get lost because that happens to me at times. I was like, yeah, we'll follow up with that next time. And then when we're putting together the notes, and we don't remember which ones we were going to carry over, and then they're gone. I don't want that to happen. So carrying these over, Mike. Don't let me miss it. So
I'll
those
do
those
my
two.
best.
The other two that are on my list are get consistent with evening journaling, which I have been. Every night I've been sitting down with my trusty notebook and writing, and just kind of writing about the day and a few other questions that I've got that I run through at night. That's super helpful. So glad that I'm doing that. The last one was no phone in bed. I should know this. This is like, Joe, you should really not have this problem, but here we are. And I've been pretty good about it. I have slipped a couple times where I'm quick pulling up chess real quick to make a quick move before I roll over to go to sleep. It's like, wait, I'm not supposed to be doing this. I'll do it in the morning. So I have slipped a few times for sure, but overall, I've been pretty good. So there's that. How about you?
Uh, you do have to ask, don't you?
I do. This is partly why, and a big part of why we do Bookworm.
Yeah. Well, I am going to fail this one pretty significantly.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if you heard recently, but I quit my job.
What?
And I have been scrambling a bit, shall we say, to get some things up and running. It's not bad stuff. It's not like even unexpected stuff. It's just little things taking longer than I thought they were going to. Like I'm doing some business consulting, right? And I've got a couple of clients already, which is awesome. But I need a website before I go to Craft and Commerce next week. So, oh yeah, I should build a website. Things like that where it's like, this needs to get done. Wasn't part of the plan. And those things keep popping up. So I'll go through my action items here just so you can shame me with each one.
Because that's what I do.
Yeah. List 10 things for I know I'm being successful when. Have not done that. I've been thinking about this, but that does not count because I've been thinking about, what do I want it to look like by the end of the year? Anytime you go through a major life transition, that's like a perfect time to reconsider all of your habits, routines. What's your ideal day going to look like? I mentioned last week in the life theme cohort, by the way, I changed my life theme. So like I'm thinking about this stuff and what it looks like, but I didn't make this list. I also did not come up with my own filtering questions. They had some on page 45 in the gap and the gain, but I did not modify those. I did not teach my family to call each other out when in the gap. I've thought about this several times, and every time I think about it, it's late at night, and I'm like, should I bring this up with Rachel? Nah, we'll talk about it tomorrow, and then I forget.
Yep.
So I'll mark a couple of these to carry over too, since you're going to do the same, and may not have a bunch of action items from this book. Spoiler alert. No phone before bed. This one I've succeeded at, but not with the shift I was going to make, which was using the books for journaling, and that's it. I've kind of dabbled with the books, and I'm using it, but not as consistently or the way I had envisioned it. There's still a lot that's happening on the computer specifically, and because I am working from home and there's always a bunch of things to do, I'm finding myself slipping into working into the evening. So this is part of like a larger, not official bookworm action item, but really establishing my shutdown routine. And this is what I'm going to work on today. And when it hits this time, I am officially done and not allowing myself to go back into the office, the studio, whatever, my home office. Getting consistent with gratitude journaling. I've done this a few times, but I wouldn't say it's consistent yet. So progress, but not there yet. And then the experience transformer. I did actually look for this online. I can't find this thing. The only thing I can find is something called an impact filter, which is sort of related, but not exactly. And just looking at it confirms what I thought last time, that whatever strategic coach is going to create is way too complicated. So I'm officially going to walk away from this one.
All right. So we had a lot of work to do for next time.
That we do.
And I'm hoping there's not going to be a ton of action items from this book. We'll see by the time we get to the end.
We'll see.
That said, let's jump into today's book so that we don't have to revel in the lack of accomplishment we both have on our action items here.
Bask in our failures.
Yep. Let's just focus on the positives. Today's book is The Things You Can See Only When You Slow Down by Haemin Sunim. And Haemin Sunim is a Zen Buddhist and has education from UC Berkeley, Harvard, Princeton. The book has been printed in 30 languages, sold 4 million copies, 265 pages long. But you wouldn't really know that because if you glance through the thing, there's a lot of pictures, lots of like short, I don't want to say poems, but like these like almost proverbs like or psalms, if you want to take a scriptural reference there. There's like a bank of those at the end of every chapter. It's just a very different format. It's 265 pages, but there's maybe 100 pages or so of reading involved here. I don't think I'm saying that in a negative way. I don't mean it that way, regardless. Lots of artwork. It was originally written in 2012, translated in 2017. I wrote all this stuff down because I'm always trying to find this stuff whenever I'm trying to talk about the book at the beginning. But yeah, that's what I know. The things you can see only when you slow down. And my original intent for picking this up was just that it feels like life is crazy busy, and I never really seem to know why or what's causing that. And I'm grateful for having picked this one up at this point, just because, if anything, it's an interesting book. But since this was my choice, and sometimes I pick books that drive you a little bit crazy, what was your, gut reaction when I told you we were going to read this book? Because I know this is one that keeps showing up on lists for me, and it sounded like you had never heard of it before. So, first impressions, Mike, what did you get?
I had not heard of it before. My first impression was you joining a monastery.
Yeah, totally. Yep. That's in a couple weeks here.
Yeah. I don't really know what I expected going into it because this was not my book. I am curious what you expected, because I think what this was, based on what you told me, was not exactly what you expected. It is essentially a lot of life philosophy from a Buddhist monk. And there are some things in here definitely that are worthwhile to think about. I just don't, but it does have, I think, limited value for both you and I, because there is a fundamental difference in our theology with the writers. Now, that's fine. We need to embrace contrary opinions. Going back to Liminal Thinking by Dave Gray, like, we need to consider things and consider the fact that we may be wrong. I don't think, though, you were looking for something that was going to challenge your faith. And ultimately, that's kind of the way it read to me, because at a fundamental level, he does kind of talk about at the end that there's a lot more in common here in the last chapter. I'm sure we'll dissect that more, but just felt a little bit like I can see what you're saying with that, and I agree with the larger principle, but you and I disagree with some very fundamental things, and I felt like I had that reaction to a lot of the things that were in this book.
Yeah, when I originally chose this, it was partially because it kept showing up on lists, and like some of the picture of what I had in my brain was like what I see when I go on walks on trails in the woods. Like, it's a chance when I slow down and you just listen to the birds and the kids screaming in the background, and It's a joke. It's okay. You don't have to laugh at it, but there's that. But you're in a peaceful situation, and you start to notice things. Especially if you're walking a similar trail daily, which is what I do. And when you do that, you have a tendency to notice things that you maybe didn't notice the last 20 times you've walked that exact same path. So you'll start to see things like that tree has a branch that's now broken. Or, interesting, there's a bird nest over there and there's little ones in it, and I've apparently not noticed them until now. So it's fun to see like the new life, the things as they change. Like you can start to see those things, but it has a little bit of a different effect as you see it each time. That concept is what I had in my brain when I picked this up. Of you're able to slow yourself, and then you can pay attention to the things around you that you wouldn't normally pay attention to. Like, what are those things that you would notice when you slow down? I was not expecting like life philosophy. Here's how rest should work. Here's how mindfulness happens. Here's what happens if you're too passionate about something. Like, I was not expecting that at all. Like, that was, yeah, far from my brain. I think if I had maybe done a little more looking, I'd have noticed some of the Buddhist leanings here. I don't know that would have deterred me, though, because I'm not sure. I was reading through some of the like cursory introduction stuff this morning, just wondering, is like, what is it that led me to picking this thing up? It's like, I don't think I noticed anything in all of that would have cued me into it being different than what I had originally expected. So there's that. Just kind of caught me off guard a little bit, I suppose.
I don't think it really caught me off guard, because I feel like a lot of the advice around mindfulness meditation is somewhat anchored in this Zen Buddhist spirituality, which isn't necessarily bad, but it also really makes me appreciate people like Chris Bailey with How to Calm Your Mind, because he comes at it from a strictly scientific approach. What does the research say? What is happening physiologically in your body when you are focusing on your breath and things like that? And How to Calm Your Mind is way beyond just the mindfulness meditation practice. He's got a separate Audible book which is all about that, but how to train your mind. But again, it's like all like the productivity benefits, and those are applicable across a large number of domains. Most of the stuff that I've come across, though, in terms of like book recommendations for how to meditate and all that kind of stuff, has the same tone as this one. And this one isn't even that. It's not, here's how you meditate more effectively or anything like that, which I don't think that's necessarily what you were going for, but I guess that's kind of what I was thinking this might be when I picked it up. And yeah, it's like a whole bunch of short one-liner type things. Well, there's a couple of stories at the beginning of each chapter, and then there's like subsections in each chapter, which are, again, there are personal stories that are added there. But then a lot of it is just like this tweet length little pithy sayings. It almost was like Seth Godin for Zen Buddhist philosophy. And that's not necessarily bad, but it's not my cup of tea.
Let's jump in here, because I think if we dive into this prologue, I think that'll maybe shed a little bit of light on this as well. But at the very beginning, he's talking about how, he's a Zen monk, and at some point he started sharing some of his thoughts and things on Facebook and Twitter, and he got a lot of feedback on that people really enjoyed it, and he liked getting that feedback. So then he wrote a book about it. Like, that's kind of the process here. I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that, but I think it maybe informs a little bit of why he's using like these short segments of sorts at the end of these chapters. I think that's maybe why he's doing that, because it made me wonder if those aren't some of his posts. Like, did he just copy some of his Facebook posts and put them at the end of this? Maybe. I don't know. It's possible. Facebook, no. But it kind of made me wonder about that. But all it is he's just kind of explaining his background, how he got to the book situation, and then of course has some of those sayings, paragraphs of sorts at the end of that. But yes.
Does that seem odd to you at all? That a monk, regardless of the religion, starts off on Facebook and then writes the book?
Okay. Jump into chapter 1, rest. Towards the beginning of this, he mentions how some people find it conflicting that his very full schedule, like he has a very full schedule, but yet he's a Zen monk, a Buddhist monk. And it's like, how do those two go together? I mean, and he makes a comment that like if he wanted more rest, he could just say no to things, but he doesn't. So I don't know. I'm with you. It seems strange, but I also have a hard time. I have a hard time putting all those pieces together. It just didn't seem to add up to me. You know, as you get through this first chapter of rest, I mean, there's some stuff that's like, wait a second, what are you talking about? This, like, right out of the gate, we're starting to get into worldview conflicting thoughts. I'm like, okay, all right. What did I get us into here?
I'm not really trying to point out a contradiction. I just think it's kind of interesting because I don't know exactly why he decided to become a monk. And I have known a few people who have joined religious orders. And like, I'm sure that there are different reasons to join different orders, different objectives with all of them. So I'm not going to profess to know that this is the way that they all work. But it occurs to me that out of the people that I've known who have made that decision, at least partly it's been because they want to put themselves in a certain environment and take themselves out of this worldly environment. And by choosing to stay on Facebook, you're immediately going back there.
Yes.
I guess my first response to joining a religious order but still being on Facebook is kind of like, well, you're sort of self-sabotaging there, which again is completely unfair because I don't know the real motives behind it. And ultimately, people on Facebook need to be reached too. But I just have myself a strong, visceral, negative reaction to Facebook anyways. And everyone has their thing, right? It's kind of become popular to trash Twitter, but that's still the one that I enjoy. So to each their own, but it just was a little bit weird. It's like, wait,
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and I know, like, right here at the beginning in the rest chapter, he gets into this, like, not disconnect, but a connection between your mind and what the universe is, and how your entire universe is what your mind can see and comprehend. And, like, that's similar to what we're talking about here, because if you like, we don't necessarily understand everything that a Zen Buddhist monk does and what their life looks like. Like, I don't have any experience with that at all. So my universe, according to his language, my universe would tell me that those types of activities don't exist because I don't have any perception of those. So in my universe, it doesn't exist. The problem I have is that it does exist. I'm just not aware of it. And there's a lot of things that do exist and do happen, whether my mind will acknowledge it or not. Like, I can't change that. But I can't say that having read his section on that, like his explanation of that particular idea, like, what you do for breakfast doesn't even happen because I'm not aware of it. Like, that's the way I would take that. Maybe that's a gross exaggeration of what he's referring to, but that was my perception of what he was intending. Or maybe not intending. That was just the way it came across to me. So I had a very hard time connecting the dots on this, which is not good because this is where we're starting on the book. Like, this is page 1 and 2 that we're talking about. So it's like, okay, now what do I do? This is like the foundation the rest of the book is going to build on. So now how am I supposed to put the rest of the dots together. So I got very nervous at this point in the book, Mike. So maybe I completely missed something.
Well, if you're trying to connect dots, you are in for a battle. Looking back at my notes from this book, there is no through line to any of this stuff. It's a bunch of random tidbits that are organized into roughly 8 different topics. And I don't know if they all started off as some sort of social media post or not. Kind of feels like a lot of this stuff was. And there's a few things in here that I jotted down that I think are pretty cool. Like, nothing is intrinsically good or bad. It's always relative. That kind of harkens back to what we learned with the gap and the gain, and the whole idea behind transforming your experiences. Like, you can take a negative thing and glean some positive from it just by your attitude and your perspective on the thing, choosing not to stay there and be resentful that this thing happened. It's not the outside world that's a whirlwind. It's our mind. That was kind of challenging. I mentioned, I'm in the middle of it with figuring out a couple different business things. And when I read that, it's like, wow, so all this stuff, all this pressure, busyness that I'm feeling, that's all internal. It doesn't have to be that way. I think I kind of failed that test these last couple weeks, but
All right.
yeah. So I don't know, but looking at the things that I jotted down, to my original point in response to you, like, there's no real connection between these things other than the loose grouping of rest. One of the things I jotted down was that too many choices make people unhappy. Those who work nonstop work without joy. I don't know. I mean, any of these things in isolation is kind of like, well, let's stop and think about that. But to be honest, there's not a whole lot in here that I was like, okay, this is a major thing, and I can't wait to talk about this with Joe.
Yeah. I will say, like, in this first section, like, outside of this whole your mind is the universe thing I don't understand, there are a couple points here that I wrote down that I think are very valid. One of those was humor opens closed hearts. And he's kind of getting there through, if you take the time to rest, you can do that in a social situation. And if you're able to find, some reason to laugh, it's a way of opening up your heart to the world, even if you're in a very rough situation. It's like that. I'm with you 100%. It's something I do on a small scale when I know I've got people who are mourning that I'm around, or tense situations where people are nervous. Like, I'll sometimes try to make some small or weird joke of some sort just to try to break ice. Like, I'll do that at times. But there was another one that, and this was my interpretation of what he has down, but it's like, when you have a situation that you need, or a decision that you need to make, take the time required to process it before you act. And it does come out a little bit later, but like, don't process things angry. We've talked about this, I don't know how many times on the shows. Like, if you're mad, angry, upset, that's the last time you need to be making decisions and just acting on things. Just take a deep breath, walk away, come back to it later. Like, you're going to be significantly better in the long run. But yes, this is at least some redemption in the first chapter. I will say that.
Yeah, I don't think I have a whole lot else to say about the first one. You want to go to the second one?
Yeah, so let's jump into mindfulness, the second chapter here. There's one, mindfulness. It's exactly what we've talked about before, being mindful of the things going on right now. But there was and this is a little bit of the strong emotion thing and piece that comes up. He had an analogy here that I actually really, really liked. This was the fish tank thing, which I had never heard of this, but just imagine that you've got muddy water in a fish tank. When you've got muddy water in a fish tank, equate that to like a difficult, nasty situation that just happened. The worst thing you can do is act on it right away. Because think about that. If you got mud in the water and you start like trying to push that mud down to the bottom, what happens? It just stirs it up even more and it gets even muddier. So it makes the situation worse. But if you take the time to step away from it and give it the space, that silt and stuff can sink to the bottom and it can start to give you clarity in the water again. It's like I'd never really thought about the whole muddy fish tank thing, but I really like that. I'm probably going to steal that analogy in some form, but I really like that one. And that to me makes a lot of sense when I've got difficult decisions to make or difficult situations to deal with. Stick to your head, muddy fish tank. Okay, all right. Settle down. It'll be okay.
Yeah, I like that story too, and that mental picture. But I also feel like this is the kind of thing that I expected from this book, and this is the kind of thing that it sounds cool, but for whatever reason doesn't really get me excited. I don't know what it is. Maybe there's something wrong with me. I'll
Yep,
I'll
that's
take
it
the
right there.
I'll take the blame for this one. I mean, that story, I understand the point, which is basically if you put mud in the water, you can't like push it down. You just got to wait and let it settle. So it's a effective metaphor, but also like after the initial, oh yeah, that's kind of a cool story, I find myself being like, okay, on to the next thing. Maybe that means that my fish tank is muddy and I'm still trying to push it down. I'm sure that's what he would probably tell me if we were having a conversation. Something about that approach that just doesn't jive with me, and I gotta, I guess, do more reflection and figure out, why is it that I'm not a big fan of that? Maybe it's because it makes me uncomfortable because I really need to spend some time thinking through it, but I don't know. I'd like to think that I'm okay doing uncomfortable things. I mean, I did just quit my job. And I'm not saying that like I don't have room to grow, especially personally. Like, I don't know. I'm not doing a very good job of explaining this, but I'm trying to put into words this like general disengagement I have with this sort of material and this tone, and I really don't understand why.
I would say from my stance, where I'm sitting, is like if I'm getting excited over an analogy for something that I feel like is pretty obvious, just because it gives me a different way of talking about it. Number one, that's a nugget that I got from a book, so it's probably worth reading. Because at some point, one nugget out of a book makes the book worth it, right? It doesn't have to be completely life changing. I just want one thing out of the book and then it was worth it. So there is that component. But also, if it's something just like an analogy about a fish tank and dealing with difficult situations, it's kind of a lame thing that if that's the piece that I'm super excited about, because that tells me that the rest of it is probably lackluster and just kind of what you would
Mm.
expect. So there is that as well. At the same time, here's maybe again, this is me. The amount of the book that is him writing about the topic and then explaining it is actually very short, which then means that probably half or more of each chapter is spent with these like short, pithy statements, 2-sentence, one-liners, one paragraph things that are completely disconnected from each other. There is no
Yeah.
through line in those at all. They're completely separate. They are social media posts, if you will. That's not what we sign up for when we read books. I'm not expecting to cruise through somebody's Twitter feed when I buy a book. Like that's the opposite of what I'm after. So I don't want the short stuff. I want a long explanation of something. Like that's why I bought the book. So it's a little frustrating to me to have more than half the chapter with these like short social media post type segments. So that's a little frustrating. Maybe that's some of what you're noticing, but those were some of my thoughts on it.
I don't know. I mean, let's just take that idea of the fish tank, right? You
Hmm.
could expound that into a larger thing. I don't think it's just that it's a small little story. I mean, we literally just read a book, The Gap and the Gain, which was a simple idea
Yeah.
expanded to fill a book.
Right.
So why do I get all excited about that one but find myself resisting this one? That's the thing there. And the only thing that I can really put my finger on is that a lot of these types of stories that are in this book, and I'm not going to ascribe this specifically to the Zen Buddhist mindset. I'm just going to say from this author in this book, it seems like there is a bit of pride's not the right word, but kind of like patting yourself on the back for going deep enough. And I kind of feel like when it comes to this sort of stuff, especially with emotions, because that's what this is all about. The main point here is that the harder we try to suppress negative emotions, the more we churn them up. Okay, well, I'm ready to admit that my emotions aren't always right. So let's move on from that, And it kind of feels like he's like, no, you just got to go deeper. You just got to go deeper. And I find that a little uncomfortable. And again, maybe that means I should, but my first reaction upon reading this is like, okay, I see where you're coming from. And yeah, we don't want to suppress negative emotions. We're not going to try to pretend that stuff doesn't get there, but we did just read The Gap and the Gain. We're not going to stay there. And I'm not going to sit there and say, oh, I feel so bad. I feel so bad. Why do I feel so bad? And I'm wallowing that till I get deep enough. And oh, this is the root of it. Like, I feel it's kind of contradictory to the book that we just read. And that I'm more in the camp of, okay, I recognize this thing, but I'm not going to just sit here and let it define me either. And that's not exactly what he's saying. So like, this is really difficult to verbalize because I'm putting words in people's mouths on both sides here, but it feels like these are competing ideas and I'm having a hard time reconciling them. All I know is that this let's just sit and be one with the world and figure out and feel what really is, like, that is not me.
Well, contrast that with the next chapter, which is passion, right? Basically, strong emotions. So going from the place of having negative emotions and just trying to sit in it and be aware of it, right? To overwhelming positive emotions. And he tells the story of when he first started teaching, he was giving his students too much to do, and he was treating it as if that was the only class that they had. So he was overwhelming them with homework and extra things. So, like, yeah, absolutely, you need to back off, dude. But it was because it was his first class, his first time as a professor, super eager, super excited. Temper that eagerness a little bit is what he's getting at here. It's like, that I get. But I can't say that, like, overexcitement is what I expected when I see passion as the title. So like that immediately threw a disconnect. So then I had a hard time connecting the rest of the chapter to it because I didn't follow it because like he tells that story. He talks about you need to learn to control overflowing eagerness. And then he had a quote that I was like, wait, what? Being right isn't nearly as important as being happy together. And I just wanted to say, no, sometimes being right is absolutely the right thing. So I don't know. I didn't know what to do with that. And I also didn't know how that connected with passion. So I just had a hard time with this one. I wrote completely disconnected thoughts down and I'm not sure where they came from.
Well, I mean that is the totality of my notes for this book, to be honest. So with passion specifically, and again, if you were to talk to him, you'd probably say passion's not necessarily bad, but a lot of the things that I jotted down here are warnings against unbridled passion. You mentioned that page 78, no matter how effective the medicine may be, if you demand that someone take it, it can taste like poison. So that's kind of he was talking about that with the teaching example that you mentioned, and realizing that he can't just be excited about the topic. He's got to basically put it out there, and then it's up to his students to engage with it. And when he stops trying to force it upon them, that's when they actually engaged with it and liked it, and it changed their lives, right? So that is kind of like dial back the passion, right? Sometimes our zeal can get in the way of being effective and getting results. The most dangerous people are those who have passion but lack wisdom. People won't be convinced until they are heard and respected. So the common theme here is always like, just chill. So, I don't know. I tend to think I am a fairly passionate person, and I don't know if I just jotted down all the things that were sort of like the warnings against that because of my personality, or if that really is the tone of this chapter, but at least based off of my notes, like that's the message that I heard. And again, like not a big fan of that. Tell me how I can channel it effectively. And it's okay to share a few warnings here and there, but it feels like that's what the majority of this stuff is. And it's not even warnings like make sure that you are careful. It seems like he goes out of his way to be very careful about some of the ways that he phrases things. It's almost like by telling a story or using a subject himself or somebody else that's not connected, it's less not forceful, but maybe condemning in the listener's ear. Like they're not hearing judgment. If they are, it's because they're putting themselves in that picture. Maybe that's like an intentional choice. But again, like I don't really like that. My personality, myself personally, I would prefer to, and I would be willing to pay good money for a coach who is going to tell me, hey, this is what you're doing wrong. Now knock it off and do this instead. And it's like, that's so anti the tone he's trying to take with this book. It's hard for me to relate to. But again, that's personality. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt there.
If you go on to the next chapter, relationships, this is where I started to put together a theme, and it'll carry over into the next chapter too, for sure. Relationships, at the beginning of this, he talks about how he was on a trip with someone he had met and became good friends with, and they were really good friends, but by a few days in, they were just sick and tired of each other, and they just wanted to get away, and he kind of sensed it, so they went off and did their own thing, and then after some time away, they felt great and came back together. The part that struck me about this is just that with the passion piece, he's talking about the problem he created as a professor. With the mindfulness piece, he was talking about, sitting with negative emotions to understand where they're coming from and being mindful of where those come from. And then jump back to where we're at now in this relationship piece, he's talking about the negative thing of being around people too much. And this is where it struck me that like he's mentioning the negative side of each of these things at the beginning of these chapters, which is the opposite of what I would have expected from a monk in this situation. So I think this is where I started to, it's like, okay, why are we focusing on the negative side of this at the beginning of these? I don't really understand why that's the focal point when I felt like this was, again, come back to the beginning of where I started here. The things you can see only when you slow down. Like, to me, that immediately has like a positive connotation. There's things that I should be able to notice if I slow down, right? And I don't know that anybody would say it's a bad thing to notice things if you slow down. But he's pointing out these negative components of each of these topics as we dive into them. So I feel like there's at least in my simpleton brain, there's a direct conflict here between what I'm finding in each of these chapters and what my expectation was. So maybe that's me sitting in the gap and not sitting in the gain. I don't know what that is, but that's what I started to notice here. Regardless of all that, he has some good points in here on this. Good conversation requires honesty. Otherwise, people get bored in conversation and just want it to end. Um, so, I mean, it's something that I feel like has some good points there. You know, he's got another one here: forgive others for your own sake, not necessarily for theirs, just so you can let things go. But again, he's focusing on the negative side of something. It's like this can cause a lot of problems for you if you don't let it go. So I don't know. I struggled with it once I connected those dots.
Yeah. The thing that challenged me from this chapter was right at the beginning, and there's not an action item associated with this, but there is some thinking to be done here on how much do we invest in good relationships. I don't know, like this chapter out of all of the chapters, I felt like his message finally got through to me, and it was more so, hey, you should really spend some time thinking about this rather than all of the short little tactical one-liners. I don't know why that is, but yeah, maybe because this is the area I need to grow the most in. I don't know.
Yep, that's it right there. Nailed it.
I mean, I know I am introverted, and my idea of a good time on a Friday night is sitting at home with a book. But I don't know. I also feel like I've internalized this message. It's been a recurring topic, if not action item, on Bookworm over the years of recognizing the importance of relationships. But the big thing I walk out of this chapter with is just a renewed desire to audit my relationships, I guess, and invest in them a little bit more intentionally. Yeah, I've got a lot going on right now, and I completely biffed all my action items from this time, but this still feels important to me. Like, not necessarily I want to do something about it, but I want to make sure that I'm not missing it, if that makes sense.
Yep. Well, let's move on to the next one because I don't really understand this one, which is love. It's the next chapter. And by not understand it, I don't mean I don't understand love. Though my wife might disagree with that. But I did feel like this one, again, he starts off with a negative story of how he was on a trip, studying somewhere. I don't remember what
This is a weird one.
it is a weird one, but he was talking about, where was he at? He was in,
I thought somebody came to where he was as a kid.
that's what it was. And he like fell in love with this gal.
Yep.
And she mentioned that she was going home in 2 weeks and he was sick because he had become so enamored with her. And then he doesn't tell her about how he feels about her. She goes back to the United States and then somehow contacted him about 3 years later to let him know that she was getting married and invited him to the wedding, and he didn't go. And then at one point they connect later, and her then husband greeted him warmly. And it was like this painful thing that he just dealt with. And I don't know if he ever told her. I mean, he has now in the book. So I was like, again, we're talking about the negative side of something. You didn't stand up and say something. Maybe that's a Western idea thing that he doesn't, that he didn't grow up with. I don't know. I don't know what the situation is there, but I don't know why I'm hearing this story, and I'm not sure how it applies to the rest of the book because I got so confused at this point that I just didn't know what to. I didn't know what to do with it. I just really didn't. Maybe you have a connecting point here, but I didn't really understand how it fit.
No, this one I only jotted down a couple of things. This was the chapter I had the least amount of notes from. Well, tied for the last chapter on spirituality. I think a couple of things that kind of stood out to me. The heart is slower than the mind. Mentions at the beginning, one of the worst feelings is to believe that you don't matter. And no action item associated with that other than, again, I want to think about how do I make sure that people that I interact with don't feel that way. Specifically, I can think of times in my life when I have felt like I don't matter. Stupid little things like I'm talking to somebody and they're not paying attention, and I'm in the middle of saying something and they just blurt out something totally unrelated because they're switching topics. Like they're not even hearing what I'm saying. It becomes obvious in that moment, and like I hate that. But yeah, I did not get any love advice from this chapter either.
I certainly did not, though maybe I should have. I don't know.
Well, I think maybe you and I are not the target market, at least for this chapter.
True.
There's a lot of those like little pieces of advice, not necessarily the stories. The stories are pretty generalizable, I feel, but a lot of the advice, that the little snippets that are in here are written towards somebody who is, I feel like, transitioning between high school age, college age, entering the workforce, new adult, basically. And so it's kind of like I wish I would have known these things when I was this age, is the approach that he's taking with some of this stuff. But what that does is it makes people who are not in that stage of life and firmly committed to at least some of the choices that they've made, it's kind of like, well, that one's not for me.
The next chapter is life, because we haven't been talking about life yet. And this one, he starts off with a story about how he walks around New York City and sometimes people ask him if he knows Kung Fu. And it's usually the kids who ask him that, but it's because he's walking around in a white robe and looks like a monk. And kids think that, guys who wear robes like that are going to know martial arts. So that's where he starts. But adults always want to know, it's like, are you super calm, super happy, super zen, all the things, which is my stereotype, obviously, because this is the negative thing always being brought up. Though this one's not really a negative. He doesn't really pitch it as a negative thing. So kudos to him on that. But he does get into like just happiness in general. But again, I'm not really sure where he's headed here, other than just take the experiences that happen and try to view them in a positive light and don't let things get to you. Like that's really the moral of the story, I think. But I'm not, again, 100%.
Well, I'm not sure I can give you any solid direction on the meaning of life, but the chapter or the time we have on this earth. But some things I jotted down in here that I really liked. I think this might be the one that I jotted the most notes from. I like on page 180 where he says the biggest obstacle to learning is pretending to know even when you don't. That is one of the better articulations of this feeling that I have felt and actually brought up in conversation a couple times in the last couple of weeks about how the more I know, the less I think I know. But I never really viewed it as like, if I think I know things, that being an obstacle to learning things. But I like that framing. That makes a lot of sense. He talks about how where you live shapes you. I didn't like that part, partly because I forget, I don't think it was the last book, but maybe the one before that. Some recent book told us that we needed to move to where the other people like us were. If we wanted to, it was the Pathless Path, maybe, about surrounding yourself with those kind of people that you wanted to be. I don't remember. But anyways, I've been rebelling against that idea for a while because I live in the middle of Wisconsin.
Yep.
This isn't where the techie startup stuff is, but those are my people. Does that mean I have to move to San Francisco? I hope not. But I do think that there is some truth to this. Where you live does actually shape you. So there's another phrase here: the more you know, the more you think you don't. The more you don't know, the more you think you do. Kind of what I was talking about earlier. But it was interesting to me the way that was phrased. There's like this reverse bias that kicks in. It's like if you encounter somebody who thinks they have no idea what they're doing, they're probably pretty smart. If you run into someone who thinks they got it all figured out, probably an idiot. It's not exactly how he was saying, but that's kind of how I heard it.
It's the connotation. Yep.
Yep. Knowledge wants to talk, wisdom wants to listen. I like that phrase a lot. And then the other one that I really liked was that life is like jazz. Much of it is improvised. I guess I like that because I feel like I'm doing a lot of improvising lately with the career change. And it's uncomfortable for my personality to not know how everything is going to play out. I can't plan it all out. That's probably good for me, but I would like it all to be neatly ordered and follow the instructions, please.
The instructions. Where are those?
I don't know. I was thinking of the Lego movie, like Emmett, at the beginning where everyone just follow the instructions. Like that's my personality. So I guess that phrase is kind of confirmation, I guess, for the stage of life I find myself in. And I take comfort in that, realizing that like this is the way it's supposed to be and everything is going to be okay.
He does have there's a section in here on this life chapter that I had forgotten it was in this particular piece, but he's got like these 3 liberating insights that he says that, a spring day as he was turning 30, he looked into his mind and realized 3 things. That seems really...
I don't like those at all. You know what that reminded me of is it Ecclesiastes? Solomon's like, there are 6 things the Lord detests. No, 7 that are an abomination.
Yes.
There's like all these lists.
Yep.
That's what that reminded me of. And I was like, I've never liked these.
Anyway, he had these 3 liberating insights. And despite his phrasing for how he gets to them, I think these 3 are pretty solid, actually. The first of which is that people aren't as interested in you as you think they are. Which, again, we've talked about before, not a, grand idea that's completely revolutionary. Not everyone has to like you. Also true. Number 3, most things we end up doing for ourselves. As much as we think we're doing things for other people, we generally are doing them for ourselves. That one, probably, but has a little more leeway, I would think. But it's like, at least these are borderline actionable. But at the same time, again, this is not fully connected to the original idea that, you need to slow down. So I kind of get it and I kind of don't at the same time. Regardless, out of context, I like those 3.
Yeah, I don't disagree with the content from those. Just the framing of those lists, I really don't like. I hope I don't do that. I probably do. He talks about how when there's something you don't like about someone else, it's usually because there's something about yourself that you don't like that you see in
Yeah, I don't like how true that is, though.
Yep.
All right, let's talk about the future, which is second to last chapter before the epilogue. The future, he starts off with, there's a section in here, 1 word of encouragement can change the future. And he talks about a school teacher of his that had a word of encouragement that he was going to be a leader and a role model to his fellow students. And it completely changed his trajectory. And he even says that he doesn't think he would be as influential today were it not for her. This feels like a very grandiose exaggeration to me. And I think that's just, it's the result of being on edge and questioning so many things, because there's so many things that are like on the brink of me not trusting the book entirely. So I think because of that, it made me think, are you sure it was that big a deal? Like, it just made me not certain. Regardless, the idea is solid. Like, encouraging, especially young people, can have a tremendous impact on their future. And if you ever want to see a kid get completely dedicated to accomplishing something, just tell them you think that they're awesome and that they can totally succeed at something, and they just thrive. least every time I've been able to see that happen, it's been phenomenal. So encourage children for sure, but it works with adults too.
Yeah. I jotted down a phrase here. One word of encouragement said with kindness and hope could change a person's future. And I really did like the story that he shared with this one, where he was actually over at his friend's house, and his friend's mom was a teacher, and he didn't like her as a teacher. And so he wanted to make sure he was out of his friend's house before she came home. And then lost track of time because they were playing with some new toys. And what he realized was that outside of the classroom, she was a really kind person, and she said something to him that kind of shaped his future. To be honest, though, like, I want to do that, obviously, for other people, but I want to be careful about how I do that. I couldn't help but think of Mindset by Carol Dweck at this section, because the example that he shared, she had a very specific, you're going to do this sort of a thing. And that's cool that he was inspired and he actually did it. But I feel like Carol Dweck talks about the danger of doing that and how you can set your kids up specifically for failure. I mean, not if it's somebody else's kid that makes it any better necessarily, but you feel it more, I think, with your own kids for sure. I want to be careful not to get them to the point where they feel they have to succeed or they're going to disappoint. And obviously that's a perspective that is kind of missing from this section. But I do like the idea of speaking into people's future, and I do believe that there are a lot of people, past me included, who just needed someone to believe in them and say, you have what it takes, give it a shot. So I want to be that for other people. I want to enable other people. And I don't know exactly how to do that, obviously, but inspired to do it from this chapter. Couple other like random ideas that are powerful in this too, about enjoying the process of learning something new. I feel like that's what we do with Bookworm. We read these books, and for whatever reason, there's a certain group of people that I encounter in real life that have a really hard time believing that I enjoy reading these nonfiction books.
Yes. I'm glad I'm not the only
It's
one
like-
that experiences that, because whenever I say something about reading productivity, self-help, business, nonfiction books, the response is one of two things. It's usually, huh, that's interesting. And
Yep.
why? Why would you do that?
I feel like if I encounter someone in real life and find out that they really enjoy reading, and we start, oh, well, what do you like reading? What's the last book that you read that you really enjoyed? They will almost always pick something from fiction. I will obviously always pick something from nonfiction. And immediately there's this disconnect. And it's like you get real excited and then, oh, you're not like me.
Yep. Yep. We recently hired a new pastor on staff for our youth pastor. And I was in his office setting up his computer, and he had a bunch of books on the wall. So, of course, I'm looking through books while I'm waiting for him to change his password. He's like, you read a lot? It's like, yeah, I read a book every couple of weeks. It's like, oh, who's your favorite author? What's your favorite title? It's like, it's not in the same realm. Like, I already know this, Darren. Like, it's just not. Like, seeing what's on your wall, it's like, we're not going to be on the same page. I can already tell you that.
Yep. But that is why I feel that I am like that, is I have learned to enjoy the process of learning something new. And it's not learning something new, I feel like, with the stuff that we do for Bookworm is different than most people would probably approach learning something new, because we alternate picking the books and we don't have 100% say on which ones we're going to do. And even if when we do, the general advice would be, if you don't enjoy a book, don't finish it, but we have to, because we said we were going to do it and we're going to talk about it. So I think there are some books that we've just had to muscle through, and I've had to learn to just find the nuggets and brew on those, even if I don't really enjoy the overall message or tone of the book. I can always find something to make it a worthwhile investment of my time. Whereas I feel like a lot of people would pick up a book, and if it's not resonating, they'd just be like, I'm not going to finish reading that one. And that's probably a very valid approach, probably the right approach for a lot of people. But there is something to be said about having to stick with the books and finish the hard things and do it in a way where it's not a drudgery. So I guess when I'm learning new things, I'm looking for anything that might be interesting, and that opens me up to a lot of new ideas. Whereas I think maybe the default approach would be, I want to figure out how to do this specific thing. And so I will go pick a book which is going to help me solve this particular problem. And again, very valid reason to pick up a book, but I'm thankful for having to muscle through the bad ones. I feel like that has made me a better reader and a better learner over these many years.
It's good to know. I'll keep picking bad books for you then.
That's not what I meant. I've picked bad books too. You never really know what you're getting into when you buy something off of Amazon.
Wait, that means you can't judge a book by its cover. Okay, good to know.
But
All right, well, let's talk about spirituality, because
do we have to?
We have to. This is the last chapter of the book before the epilogue. And he starts it with a section called Long Lost Cousins. And really the only way I can explain that is that he had a chance to go to a different was it a monastery? I think it was a monastery.
I think it was a monastery, but it was not of the same religion. It was a Christian monastery, but I don't...
Ecumenical Christian monastic community is the way he explained it.
Yeah, I know nothing about that specifically, but basically they treated him really, really well, and they developed a bond with the people that were there, and yeah, that's the way it should be.
Correct. Yeah, and it was something that struck him, and basically he's saying that, sometimes you're going to run across other people who have different views than you, but you're close enough that you can have a kindred spirit and connect with them and build relationships with them. Not necessarily, like you're not necessarily going to get into debates with them. You're not necessarily going to agree with them 100%, but you're within the same territory. So I kind of get that. I'm not entirely certain why it needs to be called spirituality when he's talking about that, because I believe that was the only section here. I'm double checking. Yeah, that was the only thing he had here. Oh no, wait, there was a different one. 2 spiritual paths in one family. Yeah, he's talking about how 2 different people can have 2 different viewpoints.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, just get along. That's the
right.
thing that kind of struck. I was like, okay, well, spirituality. If someone disagrees with you, you don't have to argue about it. You don't have to debate about it. You don't have to try to convince the other person. Just get along. That was the air I got from it, which I would sorely disagree with, that premise. But I'm also not entirely certain that that's what he's trying to get across either. I don't know. Maybe you have a better view on it, Mike.
Not really, but I feel like this maybe is mislabeled. So it says spirituality, but really what he's talking about, at least the notes that I jotted down, is religion. I know that some of the like anecdotal stuff in there is more general spiritual stuff, but the stories, yeah. And then even some of the things that I jotted down, like you reap what you sow. You don't receive more love from God by asking for it. Those are his words. Those are not mine. I'm internalizing what he's saying. This is like what's in the book. The holier a person is, the more they describe themselves as a sinner. Religious conflicts can be blamed not on the founders, but on the followers. That's an interesting idea, and maybe that's worth discussion. I think I agree with that. He says, if I forget the people he mentioned, Gandhi, Jesus, and Mohammed were to sit down, they wouldn't be fighting. They would be able to get along. But the the followers can't. I think there is some truth to that, but I also firmly disagree with the notion that they're all the same. I got to be careful here because I think everyone who follows any religion would say that they don't believe that they are all the same. Otherwise, like, why did you land on the one that you chose? Now, obviously, with our Christian theology, we have very specific beliefs, which, as I mentioned at the beginning, are kind of contradictory to some of the tone and the message throughout this entire book. It's not just this last chapter on spirituality here that I am feeling this tension. But I don't know. In my opinion, there are two paths to talking about this stuff for me that are acceptable. One is I will not talk about certain things, certain places. You know, you don't argue online, that sort of thing. And there are some the topics in the books that we cover for Bookworm, for example, where I might bring up my experience and share some personal story, but I'm not going to interject my faith into the topic and say this is what everybody must do, because that is not right. But then if we're going to chat after church on Sunday and some productivity topic comes up, it'll have a very different tone because of the context and the environment of that conversation. So either, you know, this is a religious conversation and we've all got this shared understanding of, well, this is from my experience, it would be the Bible. Okay, we're going to base our conversation off of this, or we're going to not have that shared understanding, in which case the conversation is going to sound very different. And this one is kind of like in the middle, where it's like, well, we can talk about this stuff over here, but they're basically all the same. So what that is like, it's trying to force the narrowing of these two things, I feel, but in a way that is not confrontational in any way, shape, or form. And I don't know how you do that well. I almost wish like he would just preach at me, this is why you should be a Zen Buddhist monk like me, or cut this chapter out completely.
Yes.
Or reframe it, not something along spirituality and religion, but like you were talking about, being a decent humans persons.
Yeah.
That's something I say at my house all the time. My kids are fighting. It's like, hey, can we be decent humans persons?
I like it.
And they're like, yeah. Because they inherently know like what they're doing and the way that they're acting is annoying and frustrating to somebody else. And this isn't the place to push to get your way.
Yes.
Right?
You are not more important than another person, so stop acting like it.
Yep. Exactly.
I just didn't care for that. I didn't even write anything down on this chapter. Like I don't even understand, other than like you were saying, we're all one and the same, which we're not. So that brings us to the epilogue, which I didn't even write the title for it down in my notes. It was 2 pages? 2 pages long, I think. Basically, it's talking about your original face, as he calls it. Pay attention to what's going on. My takeaway from it was just that this is a call to be mindful of what's happening. Slow your roll, basically. Settle down, pay attention, be a decent human being. Decent humans persons. There you go.
Yeah.
That's what it says, and not verbatim.
This is, I feel like, where you finally got what you thought you were going to get at the beginning of the book.
Correct. Yes. He puts a piece in the puzzle, but it doesn't go to the same puzzle. That's the trick. It's like it goes into the puzzle that I thought I was getting, but it doesn't go into the puzzle he gave me.
Well, yeah. I mean, yes and no. I think it depends on your perspective. I'm willing to concede that if you come from a different background, a different belief system, there probably is a way that the stuff ties together more firmly, but it didn't for me, and sounds like it didn't for you. This epilogue here, this 2-page section, where he talks about how wisdom isn't something we acquire, it's something that arises naturally as we slow down and notice what is already there. That's a really powerful idea. So, yeah, the big message here is slow down, befriend the silent observer, just look at things. But I can envision a very different book titled The Things You Can See Only When You Slow Down that extrapolates that idea in a much different way than the 8 chapters that we got. And I would rather read that book.
Yeah. Yes.
But that again is just me, and I'm sure that there are people who this approach really resonates with. Like you said, when you picked it, there's a lot of really great reviews of this book on Amazon. So maybe we're just cut from a different cloth.
Well, we know that one, but there's that. All right, let's do some action items because this is gonna be super exciting. I have one from this book, which is No Distractions at Breakfast. And this is based on the title of the book and the expectation I had for the book. It is not based on anything that I found inside of the book. This is just me knowing that over breakfast, I have a tendency to have a book in my hand while I'm eating at breakfast. And my family starts doing their scurry thing to make their own breakfasts if they're up and out of bed yet. And I would rather be in the moment there with them and pay attention to them and have conversations with them than be off in my own little world. So that's my choice. But that's not because of anything in the book itself. It's just based on my expectations of the book. I've got the other 2 that I'm carrying over as well, but that's the only one that's from this book. How about you, Mike? How many do you have from this one?
I do not have a single action item from this book. Argument could be made that there were a couple things I brought up that I should create action items around. I feel like it gave me some context for things that I want to kind of noodle on, but there's nothing specific that I felt by next time I want to have resolved this. This whole book kind of read to me like interesting, nice to know information, but kind of felt like it was written for somebody else.
Yep. All right, let's do some style and reading. Style-wise, it's a little disjointed for me. When he got to where he was telling his stories, the stories are well written, and the stories I can engage with pretty easily. Had a hard time connecting the story to the idea in a way that I resonated with. And then you get to the short segmented pieces at the end. Like I get where, and maybe this is it. Maybe this is like a skimmer book. Like this is not a sit down and read it book. Maybe this is you're supposed to skim over some of these and take them with, like do that over a period of time and then sit with it in silence and process it. Maybe that's what I'm supposed to do with it. He does say at the very beginning in the prologue that you need to not rush through this and read it like a novel, but you need to read it bit by bit. But we've had just shy of 3 weeks since we last recorded. I didn't read this all in like single shots. I'm going to read 4 chapters and be done for the day. I did read, half a chapter a day just because I could. And we had the time to do that. And he told me to slow down when I read it. So I did. I still didn't see it. So I struggled with the format, his choice of structure there. I struggled with some of his points and not understanding them. I struggled with just pure belief system conflicts. Struggled with a lot of things. That said, there are some fun little tidbits in here. I mean, it's one of those like, did I get a single tidbit out of it that was worth reading it? Yeah, I figured out how to explain mud in a fish tank. Like that I'm good with. Like if that's the only thing I get from it, it's probably worth it. But when it comes to rating this, like I'm gonna put it at 3.0. I just don't see it above that, and I don't see it as something I'm really going to. I don't think I'm recommending this to anybody. If you want a fun read to just kind of argue with a little bit, I know some people pick up books just because they want an argument. Sure, this is your book. Go for it. If you're in the same belief systems as Mike and I, you want something to argue with, here you go. You can pick it up and try to pick it apart. If you are interested in some of these philosophical viewpoints, yeah, it's probably a book for you. But I don't think, generally speaking, I'm going to recommend this. But that's where I land. How about you, Mike?
Do you remember before smartphones, people would keep magazines and other reading materials in their bathrooms?
Oh yeah.
In fact,
he had like the magazine racks by the toilet. That was a thing.
Yeah. The house that we live in, when we bought it, it had one of those in the master bathroom.
Okay.
And I remember as a kid, the stuff that would be in there would be like Reader's Digest type stuff where you could get through a article, page or two, in one sitting.
Yep.
I feel like that is the perfect place for a book like this.
All right. In the bathroom while you're sitting on the toilet. Okay.
Well, not necessarily that, but the very short little, I want to get inspired by something quick, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time going deep on something. That's what this reads like to me. It's almost like a devotional sort of a thing. That's not how we read it, obviously. So I'm tending to think that maybe this book just doesn't fit bookworm. I think that is a very real possibility. That being said, and as I shared throughout this, I didn't really care for it. From the very beginning, it was a forced read for me, and there were little things and little tidbits that were kind of insightful. But as I said, I had trouble connecting with this one in any way, shape, or form. It is an easy read, and the writing style is interesting, even if the content and the tone really wasn't something that I cared for. And yeah, Blake is right. There is something to be said about challenging your thoughts or facing things that you don't necessarily resonate with. But it also wasn't going to satisfy me if I was going to take that approach either. Because if I'm going to wrestle with something that I don't agree with, I want to know about it. I want to dive deep on it. I want to understand where it's coming from. And you can't get that a few sentences at a time, disconnected tidbits at a time. I don't know. There's a lot of things I just didn't really care for with this book, but I do think that the right person in the right context would probably enjoy it a lot. It's very colorful. That's one thing I think we maybe mentioned at the beginning, but didn't talk a whole lot about as we went through here. But it's more a piece of art than it is a collection of insights. I don't know, like a lot of the books that we read tend to be deep dives on a particular topic, and we're going to learn about said topic. And the style, the visual aspect of the book is almost neglected at the and the focus is solely on the ideas or the words themselves. And I'm not necessarily saying that's the better approach, but I think it is for bookworm. So I do think that it just really doesn't quite fit. I will meet you at the 3.0, and I don't think I will be recommending this one to anyone either, but that doesn't mean that I have negative feelings about it. I kind of feel like there wasn't enough here for me really to disagree strongly with it. It felt very surface level, and I kind of wish, even if he would have taken a stronger stance of like, this is the Zen Buddhist approach and this is the right one, you should listen to me. I don't know, maybe that is in itself a contradiction with Zen Buddhism. But I feel like strong convictions lightly held. I would prefer to engage in dialogue with someone who is trying to really convince me of something rather than just pointing something out. Like, okay, now do with that what you will. Like, ultimately, I'll do that anyways. But that sort of hands-off approach, I think the net result is that the emotion and the passion about what the author is saying is somewhat lost. And I have no doubt that if you had a conversation in real life, it would not be that way, because you'd be able to look into the author's eyes and you'd be able to see their body language, and you could see how much they really care about some of this stuff. But I don't know, you don't necessarily need to hype yourself up and be overly excited. Like, I think there's a lot of people who do that to a phony level, and that I don't like either. But I kind of get done with this and I'm like, be excited about something.
Just show me all the bad stuff.
Yeah.
All right, let's put it on the shelf, Mike. What's next?
Next is Decoding Greatness from Ron Friedman. And this is a recommendation from the Bookworm Club. And I have not started this one, but I have kind of paged through it. This looks like a refreshing change from this book. Let's just put it that way.
Sounds good.
After that,
let's see. In October of last year, Annie Duke, which we read one of her other books, Thinking in Bets, she came out with a new one called Quit, The Power of Knowing When to Walk Away. And I was trying to figure out what book to pick before we started, and it was one you had mentioned that you'd bought recently, and I know I had a friend recommend it to me via text as well. So it's like, hey, you should pick this up. So we're going to pick this up, and we can read it together, because that's how Bookworm works.
Deal.
Cool. Done. Awesome. We're not going to quit that one, but we will read Quit. Gap books? What you got, Mike?
I've got a new one by Seth Godin that came just the other day called The Song of Significance. And I don't know anything about this other than it's Seth Godin. So I'm sure it's going to be amazing.
Cool.
What about you?
I'm still working my way through Tribe of Mentors, Tim Ferriss's book. So I told you it was going to keep popping up.
Yes, it will.
So got through a few more of the bios. Super fun. Always fun. But another thing that's super fun is when people join the Bookworm Club. I'm full of these awesome segues today. So yes, if you join the Bookworm Club, we'll think you're awesome. We'll think you're awesome even if you just listen to Bookworm. But if you join the club, club.bookworm.fm, it is a circle community, and you can make recommendations in there. You can chat about the episodes when they come up, chat about the books, tell us how we got the ratings all wrong. And the other amazing thing you can do is you can join the Pro membership. You can do that very easily by going to bookworm.fm/pro or bookworm.fm/membership. I think those both work. Pro's easier to type, though. And but you can join the Bookworm Pro membership, and that gets you access to all of Mike's MindNode files, extra goodies. We talk about this all the time. But ultimately, we think you're amazing when you do that. So thank you to those of you who have done that. You get access to some ad-free episodes, the bootleg episodes, which that of this one will be up very shortly when we're done recording here, because it gets all the pre and post conversation outside the episode itself which is always super entertaining and sometimes boring and sometimes really weird. But that's the way it works. So yes, thanks to those of you who are members who are in that pro membership. And if you haven't joined, be sure to do so at bookworm.fm/pro.
All right. And if you are reading along with us, pick up Decoding Greatness by Ron Friedman, and we will talk to you in a couple of weeks.